Welcome to this video about the care duties in relation to independent advocacy. Please note that we have other videos about this topic in the Sky website alongside with other resources, including some reflective questions to support embedding the learning from the video. My name is Carmen and today with me is June. And we are going to explore what is independent advocacy and what difference could it make to an individual. As a social care practitioner, I'm very clear that the provision or consideration of an independent advocate is a legal duty. It's not something I can ignore. I need to bear it in mind. The law tells me that I have to consider an independent advocate or offering an independent advocate to the individual if they, the adult or the carer, have significant difficulty in getting engaged in the process. That doesn't mean they lack capacity. They may have capacity, but not have the ability to get involved in the process or engage in the process for whatever reason. The law says the condition is that, and I'm reading exactly from the Act, the condition is that the local authority considers that where an independent advocate not to be available, the individual will experience substantial difficulty in doing one or more of the following. 1. Understanding relevant information. 2. Retaining that information. 3. Using or weighting that information as part of the process of being involved. And 4. Communicating the individual's view, their own views, wishes, or feelings, whether by talking, using sign language, or any other means. Now, when somebody lacks capacity, we do use the lack of understanding, retaining information, using, weighting, and communicating. The threshold for an independent advocate is that they have substantial difficulty in doing one or more of the things, not that they can't do one or more of the things. The main role of the independent advocate is to maximize the individual's involvement in the process. The independent advocate is not somebody who purely speaks on behalf of the individual. They will only speak on behalf of the individual if the individual is by no means able of doing so. But the main role and the set of skills that an independent advocate should have are about supporting the individual in being involved as much as they can. And when I say individual, I mean either an adult or a carer, could be either or. So this legal duty is applicable as soon as a social care practitioner, I identify or think that the individual may have substantial difficulty in being engaged in the process. So having explored the legal duty, June, from your experience and your point of view as an individual, what is the difference, or what has been the difference when you have had somebody supporting you and getting your ideas across and understanding your feelings and supporting you in putting them across, and when you haven't had that? What can you share with us?
Well, when I don't have anyone with me and I am actually in a distressed state, which understandably that's what happens when you've got people coming to do a process like a sectioning on you, you feel very alone, very, very alone. And I felt the same sort of feelings I had, which I expressed in another video, when I felt alone when on my entry as an immigrant into this country with my parents. And so for me, all that brought up was that past experience and present experience, as I've experienced at that time and continuing through my life, discrimination and oppression. So that brought all that up with somebody coming to say to me, are you going to come into hospital? And I just stuttered the words, I don't know, because I didn't know anything. I was feeling so, lower than low, lower than most depressed state I've ever been in. And those words were taken as I was not complying. And I only had me to say those words. It would have been lovely to have some support of somebody, and we're going to explore who that might be. But for me, there was the support of a social worker, but there were two social workers involved, and the first one did not support me in any way. And so they said, well, we're going to take you into hospital. And that's what happened. So it was the beginning of a Mental Health Act assessment, and it was assessed that I wasn't going to comply, and so I did. I felt really alone, and I felt the power in that room. I felt like it was only me. There were three professionals there, and quite honestly, I just felt totally disempowered, even to the point of feeling that all my rights were violated because nobody was listening, nobody was there. I can carry on telling you about when I did have a more supportive experience. Shall I do that now?
Yes, I think it will be good for listeners to understand why this legal duty is there and why it's so important, so they can understand the impact it has in an individual when is exercised or not. And just to clarify, in the experience that Eunice putting across happened before an independent advocate was required. The person she's going to describe she had wasn't an independent advocate, but it's one of the reasons why this piece of legislation was brought in, so that there is the confidence that somebody is going to be there supporting individuals when needed.
Absolutely. I think that whoever it is, it's the person who is receiving that support is actually feeling that there is some leveling up of that power. Not a lot, but somebody's there and is listening and has interpreted what I'd said correctly. And this was actually a social worker who came along to supposedly finish the sectioning assessment and chose not to, in his judgment, in his wisdom, in his practice and experience. He asked me, are you going to come into hospital, which was the same question I was asked before. But this time I actually was completely ready to go in. I wasn't saying I don't know, I was ready. He said, I can see you've got, your things together and you're eating and you're dressed. And I felt that he actually made a reassessment. And he said, well, I'm not going to take you in under a section because you look as if you're coming in voluntarily. Are you going to do that? And I said, yes, I am. So just by his demeanor to me, his attitude, his own values he was using and bringing to the forefront, he demonstrated to me that I was not alone, and that, thank goodness, somebody from the profession was actually going to really countermand what was said before. So, that you have to be sectioned. So that was a huge relief. And I went into the hospital. I went in an ambulance because he had called for one to come. And he said to me, well, as it's on its way, do you mind? Would you go in the ambulance? I said, yes, of course. And then, so that all felt much more comfortable and comforting. I went into the hospital, and then it turned again into a very negative experience because I could hear the duty doctor who was doing the hospital's admission. He was asking repeatedly, why haven't you brought it in under a section? And he said, because there was no need. This is the social worker said this. there was no need. She was coming in. So my duty was fulfilled in that respect on the assessment. And he kept going, the doctor kept going on at him. And in the end, he decided, the social worker decided he would leave. So he wasn't going to impose a duty of compulsory admission. I could hear all this going on. I was sat in the corridor. And by that time, I was already being given medication. I was taking it. So I was complying. And that continued through that period of time. I felt, yes, this is where I need to be. And I'm going to see this process out because I'm here now. And I'm going to do all that it takes to get back out in my home, the community, society, all of that. And blow me, if within 2 weeks, the first social worker came back and imposed the compulsory detention. And I was absolutely so taken, well, more than taken aback, because I was there. I was actually on the ward, being very compliant, doing everything I should do. And he had used, later on I found out that that was an unlawful section, because the way he had presented me in the social report, in the beginning, I was in a very distressed state and all of that, and I was not dressed, I was not looking as if I would go anywhere. And he used those same circumstances and didn't change one word to actually now describe my circumstances as being on the ward and complying and not needing compulsory detention. So I was shocked. And that happened within the 2 weeks, because I think that the 2-week period is quite critical, because I think within the 2-week period, somehow you could present the same circumstances that you'd started that sectioning on. So, you know, to the world, it looked like, well, I was still in exactly the same state, saying, I don't know if I'll come in, looking totally, basically, if I say out of this world, really. But that had all changed, but nothing changed in the way of the paperwork. And what happened then was that I made an appeal directly. By directly, I mean straight away, to come off this order, you know, Section 3. And even then, it took me 3 months for it to come, for the appeal to be heard. Fortunately, in my case, I was let out of the hospital on Section 17 leave, which means that you're out there, but you can be pulled back at any time and section can be invoked. So, you know, you're in sort of no man's land, but it was better than being detained. But the fact it took 3 months, I was living, you know, I totally sort of, I didn't forget it, but I thought, well, I'm out now. I'm looking after my children. I'm you know, maintaining my house, my home. I'm working. I'm traveling. I'm taking medication. Appeal was heard. I was accompanied by a social work assistant who wasn't independent, but both she and I thought, well, really believed that I was going to be taken off the section. And it basically shocked both of us when I wasn't. And all I wanted to say, I mean, I'm very pleased that social work assistant was there, but I'd never met her before. I had no relationship with her. And she did, I mean, she was trying to be independent, but when again you have that power facing you of a tribunal who are professional in their status. Psychiatrist was there again, and they said no, they weren't going to disallow the section, which didn't make any sense at all. I was kept on it for the whole 6 months. And as I say, I was working and doing all the things I should do, traveling 30 miles there to my work and traveling 30 miles back. but feeling that I'd weathered this process all on my own, and it has completely left me in a traumatic state. Still does, really.
And
So,
I think thank you for sharing that, June. That's quite powerful, really, and it brings quite a lot of key messages that I'm going to summarize for the listeners, and we will pick up some of them on the other videos on the independent advocacy. But one important point is, yes, as social care practitioners, and we try our best to support the person and be on their side. But the reason why sometimes an independent advocacy is necessary is because, yes, we're not independent. We represent the local authority or we represent an organization, yeah? And we can be approachable and professional and support, but we're not independent. That's the reason why this figure has been brought, yeah? The other thing is, I really hope our listeners have got the enormous difference, yeah, from the feelings that June has transmitted on when she felt she had somebody and when she didn't. I mean, I think it's undeniable that when somebody feels supported and that's something on their own accord, that something is much more likely to succeed than when somebody is forced to do something, yeah. And I think none of us are denying that there are circumstances when sections have to be imposed. Yeah, that's correct. But we need to be really careful that we only use those legal resources when we need to. Yeah, and we build that relationship and that conversation with the individual ourselves or with an independent advocate to ensure that the individual is aware and can talk through what's going to happen, what are the options, because the reality is the social care system is a complex one. Okay, the Care Act says that the independent advocacy is there to support the individual understanding the social care system. Well, sometimes we can't do that because we are too involved in the system. So it is good to have that other person. So for listeners, yes, finishing here, we please look at all the videos that we have on this topic. We're going to talk about what is an appropriate person and what is not, and what are the outcomes of independent advocacy. But thank you very much, June, for sharing such a powerful story.
thank you.